Bitcoin is close to becoming worthless.
Let's go. Now, what's the Bitcoin?
Bitcoin's like rat poison.
Yeah. Oh,
The greatest scam in history.
let's get it.
Bitcoin will go to fucking zero.
Yeah.
Alright, you ungovernable misfits. I'm your host, Max. Everybody knows that Bitcoin is useless, worthless, and doomed to fail. But what if everyone's wrong? What if it's the system that is doomed to fail? Join me as I speak to some of the brightest people in the space and slither to the deepest, darkest depths of the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Welcome back, everyone. Today's episode is with Chief Bitcoin. Some of you will already know him from Twitter. For those of you who don't, you are in for a real treat. This was one of my favourite episodes I've done on this show. We covered so much. Bitcoin, clown world, UFOs, reincarnation, and so much more. I'm definitely going to get him back on the show because we did have some technical issues, but don't worry, you won't hear them. I've just spent literally a day editing. It's all now sounding fresh, it's all sounding great, and I hope you enjoy it. Before we start, I want to thank everyone who is on the Fountain app or any of the Podcasting 2.0 apps. I really appreciate the messages and everyone streaming sats to help support this show, and I'd also like to thank my sponsors. First up, Casa. Casa are making it really simple for any listener to set up multi-sig. It's important that you have your security set up correctly, and it's important that you can sleep at night knowing that your sats are safe. Casa make this incredibly simple with a really nice UX. I've been using them for over a year now, and I couldn't be happier. Go to keys.casa and use the code bitbybit10 to get 10% off your purchase. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me or the team. Next up, we have Fast Bitcoins. Fast Bitcoins are expanding rapidly. They are doing things differently as usual, and you can buy in-store. You can have your deposit sent straight to your Lightning address. They have got a fantastic team. They are KYC, but they do things to the best of their ability to keep you and your funds safe and secure. Go to fastbitcoins.com and check them out. Finally, we have Foundation Devices. Foundation Devices are absolutely killing it. I'm so happy to have them as a sponsor. They have an incredible team. Lily from the last show has now joined them. My good friend Bitcoin Q&A has joined them. And obviously, Zach, incredible CEO. He's been on the show a couple of times. He is pushing this company forward in the right direction. They are making cypherpunk tools for fuckwits. I can use them, and that is saying something. They really are beautifully designed, fully open source. It's going to be a bright, bright future for this company. Go to foundationdevices.com and use the code BITBYBIT to get $10 off your purchase. Enjoy the show.
Check.
Hey mate, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Yeah, let me actually turn you down just a bit here.
Yeah, I do come through quite loud, I think. Just generally a loud bloke.
Sounds great, actually. Yeah, it sounds perfect.
Well, thanks for waiting up. What did you say? It's like 3 a.m. there.
Yeah, it's 3 o'clock here in Mexico. Yeah, I'm totally backwards right now.
You're normally a bit of a night owl.
I'm absolutely, ever since I was a little kid, had trouble sleeping, would sneak outside just to play at night and while my parents were sleeping. So I've been that way my whole life, basically. Gets me into all kinds of adventures.
I bet. I bet. Well, hopefully we can get into some of them today.
Absolutely.
It's a nice adventure to get to know you. I first came across your content and memes and everything else that you're doing from a long thread that you've done, which really blew me away. It was it was perfect for someone like me. I don't like reading the Think Boy stuff or anything that's like trying to be overly complicated without having a reason to be. It was just very to the point and explained exactly what I wanted to know. And I thought that was really great. And then after reaching out to you, I've looked through the rest of the stuff that you've been doing, and yeah, it's really cool, mate. I like that it seems you are here for more than just number go up. I like the fact that I'm looking through and I'm seeing that freedom is important to you. You know, right at the top, you got Free Assange. It seems that you really get what's going on here. So I'm excited to hear your background, how you got into all this, and yeah, basically just kick it with you and see where you think this is all going.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am all about freedom, and I think I've been going down the rabbit hole for over 2 decades now. So it's I've been around a little longer than most of the younger plebs out there that we see on Bitcoin Twitter and stuff. But so I can give you a perspective of things from the 80s and such. And freedom is a big something that's become more important over the last 2 decades than it used to be. Used to be you felt pretty free and things were pretty good, but you didn't know that until they were all going bad. And then you realize, okay, they're going downhill. I was in this great place that I didn't realize, and then they sort of just started going downhill. And I got lucky because I was sort of growing up at exactly the time that was happening post 9/11. So I was sort of capable of seeing what was happening since I had lived before it. So I can give you that perspective. It definitely, definitely went downhill after 9/11. For
Yeah,
sure.
I
For the whole
concur.
world, the whole world. I mean, you can just look at what happens in airports now and see that because it changed how easy it was to get a ticket and get on a plane quite a bit.
Yeah, it's been a real change really quickly. It sounds like we're not a too dissimilar age without doxing myself or you, but
Right.
yeah, it's really happened fast, and it seems like it's accelerating to me. I don't know if you get
Hmm.
that same feeling.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the last 2 years have been a big, gigantic, huge red flag for anybody who's been reading anything about any sort of rabbit hole stuff at all. You kind of start to get a sense when things are going haywire or wonky because you develop an antenna for that stuff. It just goes with the territory as you just read as much as you possibly can. So if you read a lot, if you delve into things, you're going to get a radar to some extent for trouble.
Is that what you do a lot of the time when you're staying up at night? Then you delve in deep and read a lot of different stuff, bringing information from all different places.
Yeah, I think that's what I and anybody who's like me do. And there's a lot of us out there. We just read constantly, and it's we have an interest in all of the weird and wild stuff, and that leads us to being open-minded and accepting of theories, conspiracy
Hmm.
theories, whatever. And once you've seen a few conspiracy theories come true, then you start to accept that, yeah, that might be a way that I can, foresee what's coming is just by sort of learning the logical process of game theory. Okay, this happens. What happens after that? What are the things
Mm.
that follow? If you mandate vaccinations, what is that going to do to the economy? And, where are the parts that are going to fall down first? And how's that chain reaction going to be? So you start to get good at that after a while because you see how it works. You see the step A, step, B, step C, and things unfold in sort of a progression.
And in your group and family and people you get to spend time with day to day, are you the outsider weirdo, or are people pretty accepting of the way that you're thinking?
Definitely, as far as my family's concerned, I think way, way farther outside the box than most, almost all of my family.
Me too.
One or two. I have a couple of part members of my family who are capable of sort of being open-minded enough to listen to me and those are the ones I can converse for hours and hours with without cease. Just the
Mm.
conversation flows because that's what a rabbit hole conversation is. It goes from one hole to the next, to the next, to the next, and you just go deeper and deeper until you're into this
Mm-hmm.
really weird territory of what if, you know?
Yeah, well, I love those conversations because, you know, like you say, they do all interlink.
Hmm.
It kind of seems to me like once you start to work out a couple of the theories and you start to understand Bitcoin, you start to understand who are the players in this game and where's the power and where does it move. Then you start
Right.
to see, well, where do these energy flows go and who wants what to happen and who has more power. And then you can make an estimate of, well, how likely is X to happen and how likely is Y to happen. And it becomes, certainly for me, like I'm not as well versed in a lot of the conspiracy theory stuff as many. I'm not as well versed in a lot of that side of things. But just taking it back to the finance stuff and some of the freedom stuff, it's like it becomes pretty fucking clear and it becomes a bit of an obsession quickly because this is a game that affects your life and it affects the life of children and everyone after you. It's very difficult to step away from it. That's the thing. Once you're in, you're not coming back out again.
Yeah, no. Once you've seen it, you can't close your eyes anymore. And I think that's well. I'll just start at the beginning. In early 2000s, very early 2000s, I saw a massive UFO, which was kind of what the impetus for waking me up. I was a young man and I was coming home from school one night and driving back a back road. My grandparents lived on a back road in Northern California. And so I was coming home from school, and this back road, it was dark. There was just one street light for like, a mile distance, and you couldn't really see a lot, and it kind of bordered this little valley. And I saw these big lights, bright lights in the top of my windshield. And I was trying to figure out what they were. Were they reflections from the radio on my car? Were they coming from that street light? And I realized they weren't. And it was weird enough that I pulled over. So I pulled my car over the side of the road and I got out. And I looked up, and it clear as day. There were three massive white, perfectly circular lights in a triangular formation, flying very slowly, silently, and what appeared to be very low altitude. If they were high altitude, they would have been incredibly huge. I mean, just bigger than
Mm.
anything I would imagine. So I'm thinking it must have been low altitude. It's hard to tell distance. But if I were to have stood there and opened up, a newspaper in front of me, it would have just maybe barely covered what I was looking at as it was
Oh,
floating
wow.
over. It was big and it was quiet. There was not a single sound. And I watched it fly over this valley that didn't have any lights or anything. It was all dark down there. And then over the highway, which I could see a string of the car lights. And I watched it go over there and then go over towards another farm town, not, too distant. And I kind of watched it, and all I can remember after that is I was driving home, and I got to my house, and I told my grandma I saw these weird lights, and she kind of shrugged her shoulders, and I kind of shrugged my shoulders. And the next day, on the way to school, I heard on the radio that people had seen it all the way from Oregon down through California and into Nevada,
Oh,
and
fuck.
it kind of just went out of my mind. I didn't think
Mm.
about it much after that for maybe a year or two. And then one day I was folding laundry and I was watching Unsolved Mysteries, the original one with Robert Stack.
Mm.
And I have actually posted about this on Twitter before. So if you've cared to search for it, you can just search my name and Unsolved Mysteries, and you'll probably find that thread. And
Cool.
they had a whole thing on this, what they call the Belgian Ufo Wave, that happened in 1989, 1990, I believe it was, somewhere around there, 1990, 1991. And that was a well documented series of sightings. Thousands of people saw it. Army went after it. They had radar of it, and they couldn't figure out what these things were. But they had three white lights, circular white lights. And when I say circular white lights, I should explain what those lights look like. They didn't have any glare to them. Like you
Mm.
would see if you look up at an airplane in, atmosphere, you're going to see some
Mm.
some there's glare on the lights. And these were perfect white circles. So I've never seen a perfect white circle floating through the sky before. It's kind of like the moon, a full moon, but with perfect whiteness, perfect soft light too. So it wasn't bright, it wasn't glaring. It just looked like it was illuminating some circle was inside of it. It was really strange. So I saw that, right? And when I saw it on TV, it suddenly clicked. Wait, I saw one of those. And I kind of stood up off the couch, like involuntarily, because it suddenly hit me. It hit me all at once. If this is real, if this was something that I saw that was real, then that means I've been lied to about these things for my entire life. That that they're not just science fiction nonsense. And if they are real, what does that mean? Who built them? Where are they from? What do they want? Why are they here? Why are they flying over this little bohunk town in Northern California in the middle of the night where everyone can see them over the freeway? If it's a secret ops, why are they doing that? And it hit me really hard. And so that opened my mind to, I've been lied to once, fool me once type of situation. I'm going to start verifying things. And of course, if you start looking into UFOs, you go down rabbit holes. That's just part of the territory.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was really huge, and it still is, and I still talk about it with people, and I'm not afraid of it or shy of it or scared of anything. I think it's amazing. I would feel lucky, very lucky, to have seen something that most people don't get to see, and I just wish I could have a clearer memory of it. Actually, I tried to, when I was learning hypnosis, I had the student I was paired with regress me to that time period and try and remember what happened after I saw it and before I remember driving home, because I don't remember getting back in the car and then starting to drive home. I just remember suddenly I'm on my way home. So I'm thinking, after reading a bunch of stuff over the years, it's like, well, maybe I was abducted or something. I'll just look into it this way with the hypnosis. At least it's something fun to do. And it wasn't as fun as I thought, because as soon as we got to the point where I'm watching it and I get to the point where my memory kind of fades out, I ended up getting this huge wave of anxiety go through me while in hypnosis, and started like a tightness in my chest. And so I started, and the guy freaked out, the student, because he didn't know what to do, and he sort of just brought me out of it like right away. So I never got to break through the other side of that memory and see what was on the other side of that missing memory. And I might not have. Loose change, as my instructor put it. Sometimes people forget things, and you just can't bring it back. But I kind of hope to still do that someday, just for fun, just to poke my own subconscious and see what's in there.
Hey, mate, I'm not sure what happened there. It does this sometimes. It might just be my software.
I listened to the MP3 there, and it sounds like it cut out right after I was talking about being hypnotized.
I didn't get that far. I heard as much as you then jumped up off the sofa and you'd realised, obviously, you'd been lied to for all this time. And if they're lying about that, what else are they lying about? And then it just went silent for ages. And I was on tender hooks. I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? Like, what's he going to find out? And then fucking nothing.
See, the CIA doesn't want me telling you this stuff. That's what it is.
Exactly.
And that's the way you start thinking. It causes paranoid thinking. Yeah, well, that's exactly what it was like. I've had two moments like that in my life where I stood up and I realized suddenly that I'd been lied to and what the major implications of that was. The second one was while watching Loose Change, that 9/11 video. This, I did not know for, I think, a couple of years after 9/11 that World Trade Center 7 had collapsed, and had collapsed without being hit by its own plane, just being brushed with some debris, and had some office fires. And I had never seen the videos of it collapsing into its own footprint. And when I saw that, I knew immediately, like, oh, okay, this was an inside job. They had to have been an inside job. Somebody had to have, lined that skyscraper with a bunch of explosives and had to make the decision to pull it. And later found, of course, that the Silverstein guy had taken out the insurance policy and made, I think it was $4 billion from the insurance from 9/11 there. He had actually, he was on audio recording telling them to pull it, which is a term that the explosive industry uses for when they're doing a large project and it's time to blow the project. So anyone who watches, World Trade Center 7 footage will see what I'm talking about. And if you watch the right video from the right angle, you can see actually the explosives going off, boom, 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 before it starts to collapse. And that made me stand up.
It's fucking
how can
crazy.
how could you not understand at that moment that something was amiss, and then come to the conclusion very quickly that the entire thing was an inside job.
Planned.
Yeah.
Do you know what's so crazy is, so like I said, I don't go too hard into the conspiracy theory stuff. Just not that I don't believe it, not that I'm not on board with a lot of it. It's just time, and I'm so obsessive
Absolutely.
about Bitcoin that I'm just like, I don't have that much time. But I definitely believe that there were huge incentives, for one, and that's normally the thing to look for. And I've looked at that footage, and no, I'm not a demolition expert, but when you sort of add 1 and 1, you get to 2, and there are all the incentives, and it looks fucking weird. Definitely doesn't look right, even to me who knows nothing about demolition. You think, well, how are more people not even bothering to look at it? Because if I was to say at any family gathering or between sort of, I would say 90% of the people in Britain, if I was to say, yeah, that was an inside job, they would go, you fucking lunatic conspiracy theorist, you'd be so stupid. People died. And I'm like, yeah, well, people die in wars that are completely fucking unnecessary all the time. Like, why is that so crazy to even consider? It's just, it's just not accepted, which is mad.
Yeah, it's a logical fallacy right there. It has nothing to do with what you stated, that people died. But it's absolutely, you have it on the head there. People are not capable of going beyond a certain sort of line of what they call in the movie industry the suspension of disbelief. They're willing to go a certain extent, and then a trigger kind of gets placed where they're like, no, that's too much for me. I just can't possibly believe in that. And they'll usually have an emotional reaction at that point, and that gets into the hypnosis stuff. Why is that? Why do they have an emotional reaction? And that comes from basic programming. You're being programmed that this is reality. Nobody can question this reality. And of course, you don't know that. You don't know you have that program in you, but it's there. And it's very obvious that it's there by the way people react to being their little programs being challenged. So, like you said, if you tell someone, hey, 9/11 was an inside job, let me show you some evidence, and you show them that video, they'll just, instead of going, oh my gosh, yeah, that's kind of weird, they'll say, oh, come on, like you said, and they'll just start ad hominem, throwing insults at you or throwing insults at whoever posted the video, and they'll anything they can to defend their program, because the program has been programmed in you to be defended. That's one of the important aspects of what they do on mainstream media, is they set up this sort of narrative that anybody who doesn't believe the narrative is other, is an anti-vaxxer, is some sort of term that makes them other, and you cannot possibly identify with those people. So any evidence that they're talking about is that evidence, their evidence, non-evidence, something not even to be considered. And so the program is very, very deeply embedded that you are supposed to defend the narrative. You are supposed to be, because your ego's attached to it, you are the narrative. You are what we have told you and taught you to be. And people don't know that until later, hindsight 2020, when they've kind of broken their own programming. And they look back and they look at what the conversations they had when they were younger, or how they used to think, or who they used to vote for, or what policies they thought were good policies, and they realize they knew nothing.
Yeah, I've been on that journey. Yeah.
And that's everybody's journey, right? Hopefully. That's at least what we're supposed to do, is make mistakes and learn from them.
It's so funny you say, like, about they're defending the program. And that's what really I loved about your thread was it made things, because we've heard about this like mass formation psychosis, and you hear about people being programmed when they're watching the news, but the way you laid it out is really nice. One of the things that really struck me was you were talking about a phase. I'm going to get all the terminology wrong here, so just correct me at the end. But you were saying about like you have to get someone into the right phase to be able to work with them as a client, and so you have certain cues or things that you do which will speed that process up. And you were saying, well, when someone sits in front of the TV, after a certain amount of time, this time will get shorter and shorter because they know, well, this is my time I relax in front of the news, they sit in their chair or whatever, and then the same theme music comes on, which is another trigger. And you were saying, well, it takes, where it would sometimes take 20 minutes to get into this state, it can be almost immediate. Since reading the thread, I've really been thinking about that and thinking about how do I observe people when they watch the news? Because I will very, very rarely ever. It's only if I'm in a room with people who are watching it and it really winds me up. But right. I've started observing them. They do look hypnotized. It is different to watching other TV. It is really weird. And they then start to repeat very specific phrases in a very specific pattern, and they all repeat the same thing if they're challenged. That's something that I found particularly interesting because normally in conversation, people's vocabulary, the way they put sentences together, are pretty individual. People have their own personalities and characters. But when it comes to specifically this COVID thing now, because that's what people are arguing about most in the UK, it's like talking to zombies. It's really, really fucking weird.
It absolutely is. Have you ever happened to read a book called The Once and Future King by T.H. White?
No, I haven't. I'll make a note of it though.
It is, it's my favorite book that I've ever read, and I've read a lot of books. It's a fictional book about King Arthur. And King Arthur, the first part of it, you might have seen the Disney movie, The Sword and the Stone. That is based on the first part of this book. And the early parts of Arthur's life, where Merlin, who lives backward in time, has come to Arthur to make sure that he's not an asshole, that he understands a few things about being a king before he goes and becomes a king, so that he doesn't end up ruining the world rather than sort of saving it. And he is turned into various animals to be taught these lessons. And one of the animals he's turned into is an ant. And the ant world is very strange. Ants being one of these strange species on the planet that actually go to war with each other. Very few species exist like that, human beings being one of them. And so he was kind of getting this really black and white, amazing, sort of starkly distinctive, where all of the colors of a human life are taken out of the story. And you just have this sort of weird grayish black and white zone where the ants just work, and their antennas pick up these messages, and they all repeat the same messages to each other about, oh, I like the mammy. Here comes the mammy, mammy, mammy song again. Mammy, 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 mammy. And they all just sing mammy, mammy, mammy. And so they repeat these messages that are broadcast to them over and over while they're doing their work. And I think it's a pretty good analogy of what we do, on a daily basis. We go to work, we listen to the radio or, whatever we're doing. And I'm not talking about your podcast, by the way. I think podcasts are a separate sort of monster from this that work entirely different way. But I'm talking about mainstream programming. They call it programming for a reason. So those commercials are made to affect you in a certain way. Comedy shows are made to affect you in a certain way. Dramatic movies are made to affect you in a certain way. And I'm talking about at a sort of commercial level. The other levels, that's all art. There's directors are not trying to brainwash you with their movies. They want to make a good movie. But there are the commercial sort of the brand, the news, these brand shows, things like that. They're going to slip little things in there. Any movie to do with the Army or the Marines or anything like that is going to have U.S. propaganda all over it. The Department of Defense has a small office for Hollywood itself, where they will advise Hollywood, so to speak, and give them access to, airfields and things where they can film their movies, as long as they sort of agree not to depict the U.S. in a negative light, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a well-known, thing that's been around for a while now. So you're looking at propaganda in all of your areas of media. You just kind of have to be aware of that, so that if you, come out of a movie thinking, God, I really hate those Afghanistan people, You just have to know, kind of be discerning, right? When is art trying to slip a message in there? Art can
Mm.
be all about violence and glorify violence, and just seem like a beautiful piece of art that is glorifying violence. So do you care really as a discerning adult? You can look at things and not be influenced by them. That's a possible thing. You're not brainwashed all the time. But there are people who are walking around there who are being brainwashed all the time, and they just don't realize it because it's happening at times when they're just kind of nice and relaxed. And that's how if you notice, that's how things kind of work. You're driving along and you're listening to a radio show, and you're on this long stretch of road, and you kind of just sort of, daydream a little bit, like
Mhm.
you're listening, but you're not paying attention to something like it's just on the automatic in the background. Either you're automatically listening and you're, on the road, but most likely you're on automatic driving mode. I'm sure this has happened to many
Mhm.
people where they go into this sort of form of daydreaming. I call it daydreaming because that's the closest I think we get in our language to what state that people are used to understanding when they're changing brainwave states. And what do I mean by that? Changing brainwave states. Well, right now, you and I are in probably between beta, maybe even high beta if you're concentrating on anything technical on the computer, watching, some numbers or anything,
Mhm.
like playing a guitar, for example. If you hook someone up to an EEG machine, an what's it, encephalogram or something like that, and you put, looking at their brain waves, and they're doing either they're thinking about love, that's something that will get you up in what we call gamma, high frequency brain waves, or you're doing a task that takes a lot of concentration where you're not thinking about anything else. A lot of us love working for this exact reason because it puts us in a brainwave state where we're not thinking about stressful things, we're just thinking about working.
Mhm.
And that will be maybe high beta or gamma. You and I are probably in just regular beta right now. So we're critically analyzing thinking. My voice, sometimes people will say that if I start talking for a while, they'll start to go into hypnosis because they're people who know of hypnosis, my hypnosis friends, because I have sort of a pattern to my voice that can do that. So I try to interrupt that by raising my voice now and then or something, so it doesn't just lull my friends into a hypnotic state. But yeah, so the process is to get you down into alpha. Alpha is a light form of hypnosis. There's a range where light, very light alpha, and then deeper alpha. Um, and most of the time, it's just light alpha. And children will go in out of this all day long. Certain adults do the same thing. They'll just be on their computer typing, and they'll be thinking about something entirely different, even as they type an entire message. They can be typing something about work and thinking about something entirely different. And
Mhm.
that's sort of a good example of your background programs, your driving program. You can drive for miles and then suddenly go, oh my God, I don't remember driving the last few miles. I was thinking
Mhm.
about, my breakup or my divorce or something that you're very, very carefully focusing on. Your background programs will just run everything for you.
Mm.
Problem is if your background programs have that much power, they can just make you behave or automatically do things. So yeah, if you can do that, that means that you have powerful background programs that can just do complicated things. So you're in hypnosis, you're thinking about something entirely different, but your eyes are still working, your senses are still working, your background program that tells you how to turn the steering wheel, how much pressure to put on the gas, that's all still working. You're still scanning for danger, but the road is long, it's straight. There's, power lines just sort of going in this weird pattern where they dip a little bit and they go up and they dip a little bit and they go up. And you're listening to some music, and every so often you'll hit a little line on the road, boom, 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 or whatever it is that puts you into
Mhm.
this sort of alpha state. And if you can do all of those things while using a background program, just think about how powerful those programs could be if an unwanted program were put in there somewhere. So that one of your background programs was to react violently to someone if they said certain things, And so people who go through, abusive relationships, trauma, they develop programs that just mess them up. People who have been to war, they have programs that are incredibly difficult to unprogram. Bad trauma. And we react to trauma in certain, each in different ways, but the ways that we react to them can produce incredibly physical or emotional results. Physical being, just you wouldn't believe some of the stories I have of people being cured of incredible, what they thought were incurable problems because they were regressed to a point of their life early in their life, like such as all the way back to birth, where they had experienced some sort of trauma and had to forgive somebody or see it from a different perspective to understand why they had been put through the trauma. And then that physical ailment goes away. Phobias, lifelong phobias of serious phobias. People like I had one guy, not me, this was a different hypnotist, but it's a great example. There was a woman who had a lifelong phobia of birds, and it was debilitating because birds are everywhere. So she can't go to the beach, she can't go anywhere, parking lots where there's lots of birds, she can't go anywhere where there's lots of birds because she just can't get out of the car, she can't get out of the building, whatever. Usually what happens with hypnosis with all patients or clients or whatever you want to call the people who come and have something fixed through hypnosis is they have gone to everyone else. They've gone to all the other, mainstream doctors and therapists and tried medications and everything else, and it didn't work. So they're desperate and they end up in this, hypnotist chair. And hypnotism in the West is a mysterious power that nobody understands, and everybody thinks it's some guy with a pocket watch and creepy eyes, like looking at you, and it's not that at all. So they comment to that, and I saw this woman before my eyes because I watched the recorded video session of it. I watched her go through a past life regression because she had gone through this life regression and nothing had fixed it. And so the hypnotist, being a lifelong, been practicing for decades, knew that this might be something that they could do with past life. And this is kind of rabbit hole stuff, but she regressed her to her birth and then went before the birth and then went to where she was before she was in that place and ended up in a past life. And she went to the death of that person.
Whoa,
It had,
hold on. This is a rabbit hole I've not gone to at all. So you're talking about as in you were something else. Does it always have to be human or?
No, actually, there are people who have had past life experiences as animals. Yeah. And it doesn't really matter if it's, it does matter, but as far as curing somebody of some horrible phobia, it doesn't really matter if the past lives are real or not. It just works. You're reframing something. You're teaching the program inside of you that you don't need to be afraid of something anymore. And there's evidence to suggest that it is real. That there's really good evidence actually. If you ever want to look into it, you can look at the University of Virginia. They have a guy there. I believe his name was Ian Stevenson, who went all over the world looking at what we call reincarnation in English. People who had experienced past lives and could prove came back to this life. Children who could remember their past lives could say the names of people, family members from their past lives, and then locate those people and verify the things the child was saying. They have several hundred cases where, out of the thousands, where they've come to the conclusion that the very best option for explaining what is happening is reincarnation. There's just no other good explanation for this. One of the more dramatic, real shortly, I'll just briefly mention, was a boy who was claiming that he had been murdered, and he knew not only where his body was buried, but who the murderer was and where they lived. And the family, of course, being concerned about this, sought sort of help. And eventually, this guy came to the attention of Ian Stevenson and his team, and they went to India, where a lot of these things take place. and talked to this family. And what had occurred is the kid said, I know where the guy is. So they went there, and they said, well, if you know where a body is, let's show us where it is. We'll go dig and see if there's a body there. And kid pointed at a place on the ground. After they arrived, they dug it and they found the bones of a child. They found in the skull of that child was a hole where it had been hit in the head with something. And it just so happened that the living child who had identified this location had a birthmark on his head exactly where that hole in the skull was. He then took the team of people who were now convinced there was something going on, because how did this kid from in this other village know where the body of another child was buried, right? And so he goes to this other guy and he says, "Hey, that's him." And the guy just admits to it. Yeah, I I admit I killed a kid. Because in that
Fuck.
culture, reincarnation is accepted, and that I think is just like hypnosis. If you accept something as true, if you trust somebody, it gives you a sort of a power to open your mind to things. And I think that the culture there being open to reincarnation is why they have so many cases of reincarnation that come to the attention, because they listen to their children with that perception in mind. When the children start saying, I want to go see my other mommy, and they're like, what the hell are you talking about in the United States, right? Like, what are you talking about, your other mommy? Shut up, I'm your mommy. But in India, they stopped. Wait a minute. What do they mean, the other mommy? Who's your other mommy? Tell me about your other mommy. So they have a better sort of chance of not ignoring this phenomenon. But I think that's what the past life stuff is, why it's helping people. They are born, and this is, my own opinion after lots and lots and lots of reading and research, and I can actually give you some good books ideas for that. But there seems to be something to it, and it definitely works to help people get over their phobias. Some people.
I'm open to all of it because a lot of these things have been discussed for such a long time, so far into our history. These ideas have been discussed that it's like, well, usually if there's some logic or if there's some provability to these ideas, they stick around. And if something's just complete shit, then it generally tends to go. And it feels like, why couldn't that be a thing? The world's so fucking miraculous anyway. And sometimes you meet people who are way wiser than their years, and you meet people who have just great understandings of things and you don't understand how they possibly could. And there's so many weird, freaky things like that I mean, it totally makes sense to me. But again, like you said, it's how open is a culture to a lot of these ideas. And it feels like in the West, so closed, everything's got to be treated with drugs. Everything that you can't fully understand or explain in a quick little news bite is just said to be like woo woo, and they just like fuck it off. And it's starting to come back, some of that, or people are starting to look into some of these like Eastern medicines and looking at different options, because a lot of the medicine we've got here and the way we deal with things here is just provably dumb.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's happening. The internet has been a sort of rabbit hole accessibility tool, right? You didn't have as easy a time going down rabbit holes in the old days. You had libraries, and those in some ways are better rabbit holes. They more thoroughly will tell you about a single subject if you have the patience to sit down and read an entire book. But the patience factor has kind of changed now, hasn't it? People have been trained ever since maybe you could say during the MTV days, where very quick camera movements, you don't have the sort of long drawn out camera angles anymore that you'll see in old sitcoms and stuff. And it's very quick camera. Any YouTube video, very fast. They're keeping you in a certain brainwave state, and it's actually there's several studies about this. But what's happening is, if you can confuse your person's eyes, there's a term they have for when they use very fast zoom in and zoom out camera movements. It activates what they think of as a defensive. I'm talking, when I say they, I mean the scientists who have studied this. defensive sort of mechanism where if you're out in the woods and you see something suddenly move, it puts you in alert mode, which is straight up beta, straight alert mode. You are there and trying to figure out what's going on and critically think and assess the situation and defend yourself. Very alert. So you'll watch, shows like maybe The Office as a good example, where they have these sudden quick zooms into the characters, and that will make you pay attention to what's being said and what's happening on the screen for the short amount of time that they want you to pay attention, and then they'll kind of let you go. They'll go back to normal sort of panning and zooming, and you relax into alpha that quickly. Whoop, and you get trained to go in and out, in and out, in and out. And so commercials will do this so that you focus on certain words or scenes and remember the tagline or the logo, right? They want you remembering certain things, and they want you associating that with something. And so they can use all of those techniques and tools to sort of bring you in and out of hypnosis and put you in different brainwave states depending on what the effect they want. Do they want you to remember something? Do they want you to sort of just blindly zombie-like absorb something and then repeat it? What do they want you to do? Kind of really nefarious.
Are you still there, or are we cut off again?
Talking about all of this and what's happening today, right? Can you hear me?
Ridiculous.
I just want to make sure we haven't disconnected again. Still there, Max?
Sorry about that. I don't know whether it's the software or what it is, but it doesn't seem like more than 10 minutes is possible.
If it cuts us out on this one, we'll know it's the CIA.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, we're covering some pretty controversial and different topics. I think if they're listening in, they're going to be like, well, hold on, you've talked about aliens, you're talking about reincarnation, you're talking about Bitcoin, you're talking about the World Trade Center, you're talking about some things that we don't really want people to be thinking about. We want them programmed and in the state where we can control them. So yeah, we probably are, but we're going to keep going. And now we're on Zoom so the Chinese can listen.
That's right. And, I'm sure the Chinese have seen Star Wars, and they understand that this is now the Rebel Alliance. What we're doing is the Rebel Alliance, right? This is the weapon we have that works. And Joe Rogan has proven that. Look what happened with that, mass formation episode with Robert Malone. It just went crazy, and
incredible.
I've never had that much action on a thread before. So I think there was a real hunger for sort of understanding. Well, I understand what mass formation is, but how do we get there? How do we get to the point where people are like that? They're just zombified, and nobody realized that we all are walking around in a world full of zombified people all the time. Whatever the next Mammy, Mammy, Mammy song is going to be what they're going to be repeating. They're going to be talking about. So if you go on Twitter, you can just see they're talking about whatever the news is talking about. Whatever's trending in the news is what they're arguing about, MAGA or Trump or this or that, Russia for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, nonstop. Russia did this, Russia did that, Russia's the boogeyman. You repeat that enough to somebody, they're just going to believe it. They're not going to question it. Most people, like you said, they're busy. They're, maybe they're low time preference themselves. They are trying to accomplish something, and on their off time, they just want to relax. And since I don't have time to go look into everything that the news tells me, I'm just going to trust what they say because everyone around me is kind of doing that. So it's acceptable. It's fine. If they lied to me, well, we'll get mad at them later. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't have time to be angry at that right now. I don't have time for that reality. If I'm in the matrix, so be it. I just have to be in the matrix and just do my job because I don't have time to do, fighting the matrix. That's not gonna work.
I don't think most people even get to that stage where they start to have that introspective thinking of what you've just gone through there, because most people are so fucking busy just trying to survive. And then you have the small group of people who are so busy trying to really thrive, like the really high achieving people who've got a real goal, and they're just like you said, that there's nothing else that really takes their attention. But the majority are, because of all the things that we know from Bitcoin and how fucked up the current financial system and how this debt slavery really takes hold, Yeah, they don't have time for that thought. And to be honest, the only reason I really had time for the thought myself was just because of a complete and utter total fucking mental breakdown after years and years of work doing something I hated. And I just sat for a year and painted and smoked weed and thought and looked at the stars at night and just thought, what the fuck is the point in this life? What am I doing here? What's it all about? And I did that for a year and found Bitcoin because I was like, there's something wrong. But I think unless you take that break and really take a break and really step back, I became like a complete recluse really for that year. Well, I probably would have carried on with my programs.
Right, of course. Yeah, you when you need to understand something, you have created a goal. Once you have a real desire for something, and that usually that something is truth, some sort of truth to answer to a question, then you have a different mode of thinking than the people who are just sort of walking around trying to, get through their 9 to 5s and get their, through their kids' music rehearsal practice and everything else they have to do for life. All that other stuff, well, no one in their right mind is going to spend hours and hours a day going down the rabbit hole unless they're looking for something. So that usually takes some spark, in my opinion. That's why people end up going down the rabbit hole. Something happens that makes them want to search for a truth. And Bitcoin is one of those things that's sort of a spark for people, I think. And Bitcoin has power in that it's like anything else. I came to Bitcoin, and I'm sure a lot of other people came to Bitcoin through realizing that the money is rotten, that the entire system is set up to screw over the masses for the benefit of the few, that the entire money system is sort of designed to do that. And that even when we had hard money, when we had gold money, they were doing the same thing in different ways of doing it. And they've since realized that they can manipulate the price of a hard asset like gold through paper manipulation and stuff like that, because of the very simple fact that you cannot verify how much goes in a vault. So they understand to some extent that gold is valuable for those reasons. They just don't get why fiat money is different than gold money. They don't understand why fiat is bad. So Bitcoin is a magic sort of red pill that in order, you're going to get a signal out there for Bitcoin, right? You're going to be walking along through your life and all of a sudden Bitcoin's going to come to you somehow. It's because, your friends, or you see a billboard or whatever, and you see number go up, and maybe that's all that it takes, and you buy some. And once you bought some and you want to know if the number is going to go up a little bit more, you go on Bitcoin Twitter or the forums or Reddit or wherever, and you find the Bitcoiners. And that starts a journey, right? Because they have already gone down this part of the road and they're there for you, right? They love you. They want you to become on the road with them, and they're here to hold your hand to a certain extent. And then they say, fuck you, go do your own research, and you're off and running, So it's kind of like Morpheus coming in and saying, here's the red pill, now you've got to go do your own stuff out in the matrix. So let's see you do your stuff. And that's what we see here. You see it all day on Bitcoin Twitter. If you're on there like me, I'm on there all day. And that's where I, get the signals for everything. And I've got my feed tuned in to the world and the signals out there so that I know what's going on at all times. In that they're capable of taking all of those signals and processing them in a way that doesn't make them despair, that doesn't make them just give up and go, oh my God, this is all so terrible, I can't take it anymore. Because Bitcoin acts kind of like not only the red pill, but the hope pill, right? This is changeable, this is fixable, and we've proven it. That's very powerful. Now look where we are. 3 years, later, I think 2017, I started on Bitcoin Twitter. 4 years later, and Lightning Network was almost non-existent. Like there was just barely anyone using it. And now it's, being used to buy coffee in El Salvador as legal tender. So we've come a very long way in 12, 13 years from, Bitcoin not being worth anything at all to being what it is now. And that's what most people see is, this bubble, this sort of tulip thing. They don't understand. They don't have any idea what Bitcoin is. But that signal eventually catches everyone, right? It catches everyone. Eventually, they can't ignore it. I have a fun joke going with my family because I have a brother-in-law who is just, he's the devil's advocate of devil's advocates. This guy, you can tell him, the sky is blue, and he'll tell you why it isn't. And so he loves to argue about Bitcoin. And so I use him as sort of this sort of gauge. When he goes and buys Bitcoin, I'll know that Noah's Ark is about to take off or about to get flooded, because this guy will wait right up until the point where it's sink or swim, before he says, okay, maybe I should buy some Bitcoin. So it'll probably be like $1 million. But yeah, and I'm sure you know someone like this, right?
I know many.
I have incredibly intelligent family members. I have rocket scientists in my family. I have very, very smart people, but they are just as susceptible to mass formation, mass hypnosis as anybody else. Matter of fact, some of them more so, just because of their personality types. So you can have someone who understands how the inner workings of a satellite works at the same time is not realizing they're being brainwashed by the news that they watch for 2 hours a day. They just don't know it. They think they're way above that, right? I'm a smart guy. I'm a rocket scientist. I can't possibly be wrong about anything. So they trust themselves, and therefore anything they watch is trustworthy enough to take seriously, right? Otherwise I wouldn't watch it, because I'm so smart, I'm so brilliant. And it's that simple. It's that easy to pull the wool over somebody's eyes, just to make them believe that nobody could make you think, the wrong thing. You're so smart. Look at you. pat on the back,
Yeah, I think it seems to me as well, like from the people that I've spent time with who are like the intellectuals, let's say, they tend to quite often be lacking in the street smarts or the ability to see through a lot of bullshit. They're so smart in certain areas, but they miss massive parts of like things that people who they would look down their nose on intellectually would pick up immediately. Is that, do you think, down to arrogance, or is it just the way that they're wired? Like, is there a certain personality type that they tend to have, and therefore they miss these things?
Yeah, well, personality type, what is that, right? How is our personality type formed? So, how you think and how your habits of who you'll believe and trust and all those sorts of things are developed generally pretty early in life, and then sort of solidified as time goes on if you don't have any sort of traumatic events to reverse them. So you could fall into a trap very early in your life and just repeat that trap for your entire life if there's nothing that gets in your way to sort of change it. Most people go through roller coasters, right? We're up and down all around. Human lives are messy and crazy, and you can't, paint them under one umbrella. So I don't want to say that everyone's susceptible to this or that, but all we really have to do is look around, and you can see people are very susceptible in large numbers to hypnosis. Every single election period, you can see it. You're going to see everybody start repeating the same things, arguing the same things. Noam Chomsky once very astutely mentioned that the way media works in the modern day media, and this is the guy who wrote what's the name of the book with Herbert, Manufactured Consent, how the media is creating consent for horrible, atrocious things from the populace. And he basically said, we're allowed to talk about certain things very vigorously. We can argue very, very hard within a certain window of acceptable topics. And outside that window, we don't even get to argue about it. You're not allowed to question the science, for example. And you'll see that that's true. Fauci talking about, I am the science. People who are questioning the science are questioning me. If they're questioning me, what I say, they're questioning the science. You can't argue with this. Boom, that's it, period. And so that's the message that's given to people. And that's what the message that they will bring to Twitter or wherever else when they're arguing about things. You can't argue this, full stop, period. This is the way things are. And if you're doing that, that's a self sort of fulfilling program right there, right? You are solidifying your non-open-mindedness. you're
Mm.
you're closing the gates so that no new information can get in. And everyone has to watch out for that. I have to watch out that for myself, just to make sure I'm always keeping my mind open. And that's why I think I'll entertain. You should see my friends list. I take people from all walks of life. I don't care where you're from, as long as we're speaking each other's language. I don't care what God you worship or what path you walk. We're all human beings on the planet. We're all living here together. And in hypnosis, actually using the word earthling is a good way to sort of broaden people's perspective all by itself, because people generally will use smaller boxes when they're talking about humans. They'll think of their locality or their state. I'm a Californian, I'm an American, I'm a North American, whatever. And that puts you in a box, right? So saying earthling puts us all in a box together. We're on this planet together and floating through space. So it's not hard if you're not traumatized. Trauma will make things hard. So if you live in Palestine, for example, in the Gaza Strip, you're going to have a hard time having a relationship with the Israelis, who are literally your oppressors. So what are you going to do when your religion or your family or your father or your grandfather is teaching you to love your enemy, right? To remember that they're just as brainwashed as everyone else. If they were given a chance and brought up in the right environment, they wouldn't hate you. Test.
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, so you were talking to me about saying earthlings rather than the smaller boxes. And I thought that was a really interesting thread to pull on, because it's something I've noticed recently, is that it seems the boxes are getting smaller, and the way that people defend what box they're in is getting more aggressive. And I wondered if you thought that is something to do with the fact that people are running low on time and they're having to be a bit more aggressive and trying to separate us as much as possible.
I think there's a lot of packed into what you just said. So yeah, we've got a problem where it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to be a short fuse about certain subjects, because you just get tired of the subject hurting you, so to speak. You have something happening in your life, doesn't matter what it is, abusive parent, some abusive husband, that will just wear you down, so to speak. And you eventually can't take that anymore, and you start to look at your ex-husband or whatever as the source of your problems. And anybody who defends your ex-husband, looks like your ex-husband, talks or behaves like your ex-husband is going to be part of that problem. And you start to lump them in together and have a short fuse with those types of people. So in this case, this mass formation, we've got a lot of people who are brainwashed, who are causing problems. And political parties look at each other in this way, right? The left looks at the right as if the right is some sort of walking around like complete idiots and ruining the world. And the right looks at the left like they're walking around like complete idiots and ruining the world. And the truth lies somewhere totally in between. Those are both right and left as a narrative, right? That is a narrative that's being designed purposely. If you really look at when the right and left come together to legislate something, they agree on war. They agree. They never really disagree that we're going to give $20 billion more this year for the budget, the war budget, even though we just ended a 20-year war in Afghanistan, for example. They agree that the important things is giving money to their friends and constituents, that rich donors and stuff. So it's a game of sorts that people are playing with each other, but they're not really, I think, thinking about the fact that they're in a game, that they're pawns in a game. And that's why people often use the chessboard analogy, because it makes sense. It's easy, something that we can understand, where somebody's moving the pieces around. And you look at I think the most recent one in the Bitcoin world that's very powerful meme that sort of brings attention to this is Clown World. In my opinion, one of the most powerful memes we have, one of the most powerful weapons against tyranny, is Clown World. Because if you can make the idiots up there on stage who are, legislating your life away and your children's lives away look like clowns, then you can start to disrespect them. And that's what really needs to be done. Is there needs to be zero respect for these people, because that's exactly what they're doing. They're ruining your life now and your future in very obvious, no argument at all ways. I mean, we can just look at what they're doing, and game theory is very simple with current events, right? It's going to hurt the economy to suddenly fire 30% of your workforce. Obviously.
It's not great, is it?
There's no gray area there, right? But for a mass formation person, someone who's it absolutely is for them. They don't see that. They've been taught otherwise. The economy is great. Biden said so. CNN says so. MSNBC says so. It's stronger than it's ever been, matter of fact. Trump said so. Trump, the economy's looking so fantastic. I mean, Trump, have you been to any U.S. city recently and walked around and seen what you see on the streets? It's not doing great. There's tent cities everywhere. And Americans are in a bubble. So they don't really understand what things are like in America because they've never been outside of America. And they don't pay attention. They're trained not to pay attention to anything really outside of America unless it's some sort of like hurricane or earthquake happens or there's some sort of strife or something, some news article. They have no idea that somewhere like Albania, which I lived in for some time, in a little tiny third world country in their capital city, things are much, much nicer than they are in most cities in America. You don't see the homeless people everywhere. You don't see the meth. You don't see the drug problems that you see in the United States. The worst thing you're going to find there is probably cocaine. Heroin is barely, a whiff of it in the entire country. And it's, maybe 3 million people. So it's like a mid-sized state or something. It's a small state, really, comparatively to California. I think something like 29 Albanias can fit inside California's mass. But these people in America don't realize what they're in. They don't get it. They don't see what the money printing is doing, what the what happened in 1971, right? You separate from the gold standard and, everything goes downhill from there. You look at what happened right afterwards in the 70s and you can see the immediate effects of taking away the stopper from the money printer. And it's the entire world is under this delusion that this is an acceptable way to run our society, right? Everybody's on the fiat standard now. And the only people who have any sort of you could still buy silver and gold money, but nobody really uses it. It's more for collecting. They don't use it as a normal currency. So that's gone. And the only last person I remember who was trying to make a gold-backed money was the gold-backed dinar. And that was in Libya, and that was Gaddafi. And as soon as he started talking about that, he was murdered. So there was a U.S. intervention. So they take it very seriously. This sort of Bitcoin is something that I don't think they saw coming, that it interrupted their plans to such an extent that they are now in a black hole gravity situation where Bitcoin is sucking the value or the legitimacy out of their money slowly, bit by bit,
Nice
piece
plug,
by piece.
thank you.
Absolutely. It is. This is a reality that can't be ignored. The IMF, basically is, straight up admitting it. The banks are admitting it. Russian central bank just coming out and saying we need to ban all of this, sort of a too late sort of declaration. But China, of course, repeatedly banning Bitcoin in various ways and shooting itself in the foot. And we're seeing that game theory play out where Bitcoin, just the honey badger of money, hardest money in existence that has ever existed in man, cannot be destroyed, is just plodding along like a little honey badger and doesn't give a fuck, right? Just you do whatever you're going to do, pull whatever shenanigans you're going to pull. As long as an asteroid doesn't take out the entire planet or the entire internet infrastructure, Bitcoin is going to win.
It's so fucking beautiful.
It really is.
I feel at least that it's why things are accelerating is that these people are trying to claw and grab on to all the power in any way as fast as they possibly can. And it's
Yes.
starting to spiral and become more obvious because
Yeah.
maybe something that they would have done over 100 years or 200 years is being done in a decade.
Right.
It feels as though they're slipping up. As scary as the world is getting, it feels as though more and more people are starting to wake up to it. Just from personal experiences, chatting to people at the gym or whatever, sometimes conversations will go a certain way, and I feel like, yeah, you're starting to get this. You know that there's no tie to reality with money. Like, a lot of people are starting to see that, and I think a lot of it is just like being on social media, like Bitcoiners just sharing constantly in every thread. Just whenever Lagarde speaks or someone speaks, they're in there and they're just banging in memes and just explaining to people. And I do think it's starting to work, and people are starting to see the cracks. It's not that unrealistic to think that even if they are programming people and you know, you do get this kind of like aggressive pushback as a Bitcoiner quite often, and it's probably due to the programming that you're talking about. But you only have to get to the point where someone goes selfishly, well, so if I just keep my savings in this thing rather than this thing, I'll be better off. Yes. It's not that much of a jump. They don't have to actually understand the intricacies of it, what this technology can potentially do, why it's here, what the cypherpunks were trying to do. They don't even have to understand all the freedom aspect. They just have to get to that point where they can say, does it make my life better for me? And it does. And so then they're going to start digging in. And I think if anyone's going to look ever, it's now, because it's so fucked up out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Bitcoin, many people have used the analogy that it's like Noah's Ark, and everyone, when it starts to rain, starts looking around for an ark, right? They start looking for something to float on. And so I don't think it's as quite as simple of that, because I think in this case, just like in Noah's Ark, it's a good analogy, but it's not quite as simple. But in the end, that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a flood. There's going to be hyperinflation of fiat money. Things are going to go real bad in a lot of places. And at that point, it's too late. That's why people use that analogy. Get on the ark now, because those tickets will go out the window once the rain comes. You won't be able to get on the ark. No, think about it. I mean, everything's going to shit all over the world, and all of a sudden you're thinking, I better get Bitcoin at the same time that maybe a couple billion people are thinking I should get Bitcoin. You're not going to be able to get Bitcoin. Exchanges are going to have trouble just dealing with traffic and new signups, let alone the sales and the scarcity. It'll be gone, and you'll have plebs coming in and dumping a little here, dumping a little there, because it's going up so fast, and they need some money maybe to make their next. They're at that point. You're in the sort of the dreamboat, the lifeboat on the Titanic, the nice lifeboat that's going to be able to deal with the ocean waves and everything. Everybody wants a piece of that lifeboat. If at that moment on the Titanic, as it was sinking, what would people give for a small little space on that lifeboat? It's all full up with people. They'll give everything. They'll give everything they possibly have for a little bit of that space. And so when you're talking about Bitcoin, you need to think of it in terms of all or nothing sort of idea, because that's what's happening. Is it's taking over all value, because it is a base necessity to have something to measure value against. And we don't have an agreement on that in this world. We have the US dollar as the reserve, but nobody really thinks of that as the end all be all anymore. You've got the euro, you've got the sterling, you've got all these things going on, the IMF doing exchange rates, shenanigans going on there. Nobody can find a signal in all that noise, and it's designed that way, right? Fiat money is designed to confuse the fuck out of you. You go to school for years to become an economist for a reason, so they can brainwash you into thinking that all the nonsense in those books makes sense, that there's some sort of end part where you become an expert, a scientist at money, and you understand the intricacies of money. No. Money's pretty simple. They just fucked it all up on purpose so that they can play with it
It's so
the way
true.
they want to.
It's so true.
Right? Keynesian economics don't work except for a small majority of the people, and it's designed that way. And so Bitcoin is like a way of understanding all of the things that you couldn't understand, because you can't understand it without looking at it from outside in. If you go inside, you will become brainwashed and literally have no idea what the hell you're talking about. You'll repeat everything you were taught, and you'll try to make sense of things, but they actually won't fit together, like puzzle pieces that kind of fit together, but they don't really, when you're making a puzzle and you realize that and you have to take the puzzle piece back out, they don't take the puzzle pieces back out, the economists. They continue building the puzzle from pieces that don't fit together. And you can see that in their arguments once you take the orange pill, because the very basic ideas of money are presented to you very cleanly and efficiently with Bitcoin, right? Who's behind the curtain controlling the money? Nobody. It's the code. It's open source. Everybody can verify it. So that's nothing at all like how we handle money now. Now we have magicians, literally magicians, who are in some sort of high place called the Federal Reserve, or the central bank of Europe, or whatever, European Central Bank, or the IMF, who understand all these things that we mortal beings can't understand. And they tell us how to feel about money, what to think about money. And that's, Jim Cramer comes on and tries to, throw that out to the CNBC audience and see if it takes. And then they manipulate markets with all of this nonsense. And someone who's just in that matrix sort of situation and just listening to it in the background while they're working and driving home, or they're making dinner and they're listening to all this nonsense, it's all noise, and they can't find any signal. And Bitcoin can break through that. Bitcoin is like a red pill. It can break through that noise and give you a sort of anchor point, a foundation stone to build your understanding of money on. And once you start that, all of the flaws of fiat start to become more and more and more apparent. And by the way, shout out to Max Kaiser for helping me understand all of that, back in, 2013 or so, 2014.
He's been a brilliant voice.
God,
guys,
he's just funny to watch. So, if you got someone who's entertaining and can deliver messages, then that's a powerful thing. Not to mention, my God, the guy just doesn't give a fuck about anyone or anything. He just he's just Max Kaiser.
Yeah.
You gotta love it.
He's fucking hilarious. I do love it. And I remember, like, early on in my journey, it was later than that.
Tell me about your journey. What was your impetus for finding Bitcoin? You said you had like the issues in your life, and then suddenly, what brought Bitcoin into your life?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. So, like, I had a really fucked up time early on in my life, which I don't really want to go into here. Maybe over a beer with you, I'd go into it. But pretty unstable, scary times, and so I always had a bit of a like chip on my shoulder, a bit of a obsession with having something that was mine, because I spent a lot of time without a place to be, asleep and all that kind of stuff. And so I got obsessed at like probably about 13. I was like, I'm going to buy property. I'm going to have a home. And I did what I needed to do to make that happen. And I worked constantly. Like I didn't do anything that normal kids would do. I didn't spend money on things that normal people would. I just saved until I started getting into property and bought my first as a share. I had half of a property with this lady that I knew who was into property at like, I think I was 15. I got my first one. And then I just fucking went hell for leather and just worked on property, worked on a load of other businesses, did loads of buy-to-let, started to understand, I can borrow money at this rate, property values go up at this rate. So as long as I can borrow, I make money. And while it's going up in value, I can rent it out, which means I make more money, and I just fucking did that as like a perpetual thing. But I never actually stopped and thought, well, why does property value go up? Like, why does it double every... Honestly, I never thought about it.
I didn't do anything to the house, right? It actually got worse in the last couple of years. Like, why did it double in value all of a sudden? Right.
Yeah, I never thought that. I knew property doubles roughly every 10 years. And I knew I can borrow at this very, very low rate. And so I'll just keep fucking doing that. anyway, so I ran a couple of other businesses on the side, worked, and I just hit a point in like 2017, early 2017, where I completely fucking just shut down, broke down, couldn't do anything anymore, didn't want to get out of bed, didn't see the point in life, just thought, what the fuck am I doing? I think because I'd got the things that I wanted, like I wanted a certain car on the drive, I wanted to have a roof over my head, I wanted to have a certain lifestyle, I thought I'd be happy when I have that. I did think, that's what I want. And I was actually just fucking miserable. And so then I folded the business that I was in because I just wanted to paint. Like I always wanted to be an artist when I was younger, when I was a kid, but I couldn't just because of circumstances. Like I couldn't do it. Just had to work. So I started just painting every evening, put on some music, drink some wine, smoke some weed, just enjoy my time. So I was just like, fuck all the rest of it. I don't care anymore about anything else. That's what I did for like a year. And I think that was where my mind was open enough. Like firstly, I wasn't really bothered if I lived or died. I wasn't like, I'm going to jump in front of a bus tomorrow, but I literally didn't care. Like I was just like, I don't see the fucking point in all this. I don't care. I'm just going to do what I want day by day, no structure. And I was lucky enough that like I'd always not trusted authority. Again, like my past was a bit weird. I'd not trusted police. I'd not trusted any of the shit that, normal people do. I always had cash, and people used to take the piss out of me. They're like, oh, why don't you use cards? And I'm like, fuck that, I'm not doing that. And like, everyone always thought it was a bit weird. And so my mate phoned me. He's been on the show before. He just said, mate, there's this thing which I'm fucking obsessed with, and it's called Bitcoin. And like, I know you're going to love it. I know you're going to love it. And I was like, oh, mate, I'm fucking not really in the mood. Like, I'm just painting, and like I don't really feel like. He was like, just come up, let's have dinner. And anyway, so we sat, and he said, look, this is something that takes power away from governments. It's like cash. They can't inflate it. Like starts explaining it, and I'm like, what the fuck? This is amazing. And he was like, I know, and no one will listen to me. No one will fucking listen. And I'm like, this is crazy. So he like starts sending me all these links and YouTube videos and different things to read and all this. And so that was like the end. It was right at the top of that bull run. It was like 2017, whatever it was, $18,000. That's when I started piling in. And then I just saw like a 2-year bear market, but I couldn't do anything else for the whole time. And I still can't now. And so that was my entry. And once it got me, once I realized that like, this takes the power away, the most powerful power that they have, which is literally to steal time from people, to control everything, all energy, all value. Once I got that, I was just like, I literally don't care if I lose every penny. I don't care if I look stupid telling people. I don't care whatever people think of me. I'm just fucking going to dedicate my life to this, because if this works, the world can be beautiful. And if it doesn't work, I'm just back in the same situation that I was, where I was a miserable bastard and didn't care if I lived or died. So I had nothing to lose.
That's amazing. That you actually were, I mean, maybe you didn't realize it at the time, but your life, the way it was shaped, set you up to understand Bitcoin to some extent, to understand the power of Bitcoin. It gave you the tools to be able to, the right perspective, to be able to see it for what it was, when other people just can't see that. And remember what I said earlier about it, some sort of events in your life, trauma, making one open-minded enough to sort of understand some aspect of Bitcoin that draws them in. Or maybe not even Bitcoin necessarily, as sort of an instinctual thing where they know everything's corrupt in the money world, and everything seems hopeless, and they're just on a rat race, on a hamster wheel going in and out. And then anything, of course, that gets introduced to you, like, hey, this might change all of that, you'll listen for a little bit, maybe, right? So Bitcoin, even if you don't understand it, kind of is still that lifeboat. Okay, I can see it. It might be a lifeboat. I understand that other people are on the lifeboat. I see people buying it $60,000 now, whatever, $40,000. So maybe there's something to it, and that's enough for you to put one foot in the boat, right? And you get to this sort of understanding later. But you've got to have the antenna to be able to pick up on just the barest of signals from Bitcoin. And that's what Bitcoin's great at. And I'm sure as you've seen it, you've talked to lots of people, you're a Bitcoiner, it breaks through the noise. It really does. And, that's, I think, why Max Kaiser coined the whole orange pill thing. I'm assuming he coined it. He's the one I heard it from.
I think he
But,
did. Was that, were you already searching for something?
I already knew money was the root of all evil. I knew that the manipulation of money allowed the things that were happening to happen. I realized that without the money in its printable form, you couldn't go to war. I understood hard money and soft money to some extent, but it wasn't the part that's hard to understand is the soft money. The hard money is easy. It's easy to understand why gold makes sense. It's hard to understand why fiat makes sense because it doesn't. So you're looking for some reason why everyone has switched to it, right? Like why are we doing all this? I don't understand what M1 is, money supply and all. That is on purpose. They purposely are trying to confuse the shit out of you so that when they come on TV and say inflation is good, you'll believe it. You're the cuck, right? That's just been going on for quite some time. My entire life that's been going on. The wool has been pulled over people's eyes. The fact that there wasn't a civil war in 1971 is incredible. Or a world war even, because it was basically theft from not just everybody's time and energy and everything else, but theft from other countries. U.S. were basically pirates stealing their wealth. They tricked them into agreeing to putting all their gold in our vaults and then giving them useless fucking paper. But that paper was an IOU, right? As long as the IOU was good and they honored that IOU and you can come turn that in for gold, everything's great. But the moment you take that away, you stole all of their trust, all of their, the reason, the way everything worked just literally disappeared just with that one stroke of the pen, gone. So yeah, understanding all of that, people come at it from different angles, but I think for the most part, people can't understand money because the money they're using is ununderstandable. It doesn't make sense. They think it's supposed to make sense. And so they're just always it feels hopeless. Like, I try and understand money, but I just can't get there because it doesn't make sense. You have to look at it from the perspective that it is absolutely a scam to steal your time, energy, and resources. That's what it is.
It really is.
And it's brilliant.
It really is.
Did an alien come up with this? Yeah, they're incredibly clever. Most humans aren't that clever, and we copy. We're really good at copying things, but we're really bad and slow at finding ways to make something new and break out of a pattern. So when guys like Satoshi come along, it's like once in maybe 100 years or something where some guy just gives you something new and successfully does
brilliant.
it. Yeah, successfully does it. Lots of people have ideas, but they just can't get the idea off the ground. Satoshi's idea worked. So, Leonardo da Vinci had flying machine ideas, but he never got one to work like the Wright brothers plane did. So we build on top of each other our ideas, and eventually somebody puts all of the parts together and makes the machine work. So we're monkeys, basically. Imagine, smart birds can do some of the things that we do. Get through puzzles and stuff, and they actually will do it faster and better than some humans. So we're not the brilliant species that we really think we are, but we are good at using tools and creating tools over long periods of time, and that's what ours seems to be our ability over other species. It's just that our tool making grows, doesn't stop. It grows from one point to another, and then we have this sort of quantum leap every once in a while of technology. And Bitcoin is the first quantum leap of money we've had since the gold money was created, which is thousands of years. So we're really slow at these sort of evolution of technology. So if you really want to think about it in terms of aliens, we are so unbelievably early in the evolutionary sort of scale of technologies that it's silly, like, like really, really, really early, caveman almost, like not very far away from caveman. You know what I mean? We figured out fire, we figured out electricity, we figured out maybe gravity, and that there might be ways that we could defeat it, but we haven't really got there yet. Touches on other UFO stuff, but obviously whoever flies these UFOs along figured that out.
What do you think this tool does? Bitcoin as a tool for humanity, if we do go to hyper-Bitcoinization or something close to it, if this network does continue to do what it's doing, if things like the Lightning Network continue and develop, if we have sound money and we don't have this corruption of value, we don't have this distortion constantly in the middle with this leeching from a small group and distorting signal, where do you think this takes us? Like, do you think that this is something that can create the next leap forward? And if it is that all that aliens are? Is that just humans that get off planet, that we get to a certain point in civilization where things are amazing and we eventually fuck it up and then we start all over again? Or do you think that it's like we're just one of millions of different species that are all across the universe and we're just the really basic, really dumb ones, but we're just about to do some serious steps forward now that we don't have these leeches, or now that we won't do very soon, hopefully?
Yes to all of that. I think that Bitcoin is an evolutionary step in human evolution, technological evolution. Without this specific step, we would not be able to move forward on a plane of truth. Bitcoin kind of equals a sort of plane of truth, whereas fiat is a plane of lies and deceit. In order for fiat to do what it's supposed to do, which is steal your time, energy, and resources, it produces from its very nature nothing but lies. Everything that you see and hear that supports this monetary system is a lie to keep the monetary system afloat, because fiat has nothing backing it. The only thing backing it really is our agreement that it's worth something. And maybe if you want to go down the Paul Krugman Avenue, guns and missiles back it. In other words, the strongest military in the world is the one who's going to have the reserve currency because they say so. And that's sort of just a mass formation in of itself. People have accepted that the money has value and continue to do slave wage labor for slave money, fiat money. You watch the police officers fighting the people and the protests, and you realize both of them are being paid with the same shit money, and the people who create the shit money and run everything are laughing because, look, we've got them fighting each other on the streets while we sit up here in our ivory tower printing the money that pays them. So what a joke, right? Bitcoin has done something that was impossible, which is it's given us a way to verify actual truth. With money, and can combine that with our money supply, which has not been possible before. It's never been possible to know exactly how much gold is in the emperor's treasury, how much wealth is there, and that's connected to how much things are valued. I like to look at things on a micro scale to make money easier to understand. If you land on a desert island or an island in the middle of the ocean and there's not much there, and you're trying to figure out how to divide up resources amongst you and the other, 5 people in the boat that landed on the island, you're going to eventually want to create some sort of system of barter, of payment for your time, for your energy that you spent catching fish, for example. What are you going to trade me for the fish I spent all day catching? Well, I've got this crab over here, or maybe I got some coconuts, or I have these seashells. And there's only so many seashells around the island here. So maybe we should start using these seashells as money. Okay, sounds good for me. So now everybody starts looking for seashells. Well, the moment somebody swims a little farther off and finds a seashell cache on the seafloor, they're going to be able to come in and inflate the money supply quite a bit, right? They're going to be able to come in and say, you know what, for your coconuts, screw all the rest of you. I'll give you 10 seashells for your coconuts. Fuck the rest of you guys. I got all the coconuts now. And you're going to have to buy those for me for 13 seashells. And they're sitting there going, oh my God, 13 seashells. Well, it took me, all day to find 5. So it's going to take days for me to get a coconut now. You've inflated the money supply. You've created a cost problem where people who now can't work enough to get the coconuts just by bringing in printing more money, so to speak. But for you, the guy who has huge amounts of seashells, none of that matters because you can buy everything. So you're the rich guy who can buy everything while everybody else suffers. And that's what we have now, is they can do anytime they want, print money and buy all the assets up, the real hard assets, the housing, the oil, everything else. They buy all of that and they just move that around between each other. It's like a little casino game. And even if they fail, they're still rich, right? They've got assets over here, assets over there. They can always sell that for something, even if the entire market crashes, as long as they have ownership of it. While you never buy any assets. You don't have any money for assets, right? So your story you told me about investing in real estate and earning your money, you kind of understood the game a little bit earlier than most people, and probably than most people will ever understand it. Because most people are working a 9 to 5 and just paycheck to paycheck. And 401k is about as much as they'll ever understand investing. S&P 500 is maybe as far as they'll understand investment. And they really don't even understand why that's worth anything and what keeps it going and growing. Signal, right? If you can get anything through that formation, it starts a little bit of crack in the cement. It gets a little bit going. And Bitcoin is a wedge, right? A hammer that breaks through that stuff hard, and it's growing, and you can't ignore the signal as that signal grows. El Salvador is a piece of that growing signal. It's a warning sign, right? Nations sort of woke up, I think, that day when El Salvador said this is legal tender now. I think it became a serious game at that point. Oh shit, this is contagious, and we have to try and stop this contagion, but we can't. And I think they've come to that conclusion, and that's just like you said, that's why it's accelerating. They know that the money's failing, and if the money fails, the gravy train ends. And who are people going to blame? They're going to blame the people in the ivory tower, and they're going to chop that fucking tower down. And Bitcoin is going to do that regardless of what they want. As a tool, Bitcoin provides truth. It provides verification. It provides honest money for an honest day's work. With Bitcoin, you can now grow monetary technology. You can create AI that will fairly distribute money based on time, based on energy, based on resources. You can find agreed upon values, formulas to pay people that are agreed upon over the entire planet. In other words, my time, I'm born on the planet. I come out of a woman's body just like everybody else. I'm made up of the same, stardust, whatever you want to say, we're made up out of atoms and everything else. My time should be just as valuable as yours. Your time should be just as valuable as mine. Donald Trump, his time at a base level, just being a human being on the planet, is the same value as mine. He doesn't get to be more valuable than me. And that's before you add in everything else, all the skills, services you're providing, how many people are trying to access the services you provide. That changes the formula. But at the base level, when we're all 1 year old, our time is worth the same amount of money, right? The same amount of resource. So Bitcoin allows you to say, well, there are only this many Bitcoin, this many Satoshis, and everything is being measured against Bitcoin as a store of value, right? My banana is worth 2 Satoshis. Well, if a banana is worth 2 Satoshis, how many bananas are you willing to trade for a car? That means a car is worth this many. So you have a baseline sort of measuring stick. We've never had that before. The closest thing was gold, but gold was manipulatable. So you could change the actual value of the coinage by rubbing off a little bit of the gold and trick people, thus messing up the formulas. But with Bitcoin, the formulas can remain constant. Once they're created, they're good, right? We just have to sort of create an agreed upon formula, is probably the best word, for our time, energy, and resources to make it as fair as possible. Country to country, that will change wherever you are. If you're in the mountains, it might be more difficult to collect a certain resource. So you're working really hard, and maybe it's dangerous. There's snakes and spiders and things. And so that'll change the Satoshi value of maybe mining something in this area versus mining something in that area. But that base time, 8 hours a day, that's going to be the same for everybody. For the cost of a threat to your bodily life, if you're climbing a tall tower, everybody who climbs past 500 feet is getting paid this much, just for the fact that they climb past 500 feet. You now have the ability to do that because the money's constant. The value is constant. You don't have to think about it in terms of yen or dollars or this or that. It's Bitcoin worldwide. This is how much a Satoshi is worth. And that allows us to build from that, right? A world of truth, a world of fairness.
It's incredible. It's very, very exciting, especially in comparison to what we're seeing today. And, it gives everyone hope. And I think, we touched on it before, but you can start to change the way you see the world and think of things when you have that baseline of truth. You can start to think, well, I should look after myself and I should have a lower time preference and I should care about what's happening in the future because there is a way that we can battle this and there is a way that the world can be incredible and that all of the bullshit that you hear on the news and all the infighting and all of that is not real. It's not what humans really want to be doing. And so it's very exciting. And I sat down with a good friend of mine, self-banked last episode, who's a doctor here in the UK, incredible Bitcoiner. We were saying, how lucky is it that he's found Bitcoin? Because he's now in a position where they're saying to you, you get the jab or you're fired. He has been against it from day one. And he said, you know what? I feel so incredibly lucky that I have Bitcoin and that I've saved my time, my value in Bitcoin, because now I actually own my own thoughts and I own my own body because I'm saying, fuck you. I'm not going to do it. I won't be
Fuck
told.
you money.
Exactly. It's fuck you money. And it's so beautiful when you see that. You actually can see this playing forward. And, I kind of see most people in my day-to-day life as completely with a noose around their neck, because even if they wanted to think out the box, even if they wanted to think that everything is a lie and they wanted to make changes, they can't really, because they've got families, they've got mortgages, they've got debts, they're on this hamster wheel, which is getting tougher and tougher over time. And unless they've got these assets where the money that's continually being inflated and making it harder for everyone else, without those assets, you just fall behind. And we've got a whole generation, like people generally my age, like they don't have properties, they don't have assets, they're living at home with their parents or renting and they're getting by month to month and they're all angry, but they're all angry at the wrong people. And it's so funny to watch. It's like it's either the left thinking it's this group or it's the right thinking it's this group, and they're all angry and they're like, we don't have property because fill in the blank, or we don't have assets because of fill in the blank, and life's really hard. And I feel, or I hope, that once they realize, once they understand just how fucking evil this regime has been, just how unfair it's been, just how wrong it's been, and that there's this other incredible technology, this new money that can take the majority of those issues away, I think, or I hope that, they're going to burn the whole fucking thing down. That's how it feels.
Right. Burn the whole thing down just means take your money out of other things and buy Bitcoin with it. And the money being the fiat, being the problem, right? So you're passing more and more of the fiat into less and less hands over time. So you just have these people who are basically left holding shit bags. And eventually, just like any hyperinflationary scenario, you're going to have people with, barrels full of money looking for a few Satoshis here and there. Doing deals on the streets, just like drug deals, just to get a little bit of real money so that they can continue on with their lives. And we see that in Venezuela. Venezuela gets a hard rap. It, very socialist, but it's not like socialism is the only problem in Venezuela. The U.S. has literally created an embargo, a sanction embargo all around Venezuela, and told all of the people that would normally be trading with Venezuela for different things, don't trade with Venezuela, and then stole $2 billion of their gold and won't let it be repatriated back to Venezuela, and then literally created a puppet person, Juan Guaido, right, and said, this is the real president of Venezuela, so we're going to give him the decision of who gets the gold. And it's just like absolute insanity what they've done to Venezuela, all because Venezuela has a huge oil resource, right? Well, Bitcoin came into that at some point. Venezuelans started mining Bitcoin when their hyperinflation started. People realized Bitcoin was kind of a way around it. And the government caught on to that pretty quickly and actually seized, mining operations and kind of gave them a choice of, we'll take it all away from you, or you'll give us part of that Bitcoin that you're mining. But nobody, what I don't think has happened, at least the big catalysts of hyper Bitcoinization is going to be the first time a central bank is caught buying Bitcoin with printed money. That's like a hack, right? So if the U.S. Federal Reserve is not doing this, then the U.S. Federal Reserve is full of some of the stupidest people on the planet, because they have access to the most powerful energy or wealth generating machine in existence right now, with a curse attached to it, right? The curse is that if you use this wealth generating machine, you'll erode the time period that your wealth lasts for. So you're eroding the time, energy, and resources of the entire population, thus impoverishing your country the more you use this tool. So it's kind of like a cursed tool. But the people at the top, they can't get enough of it, right? This is an addiction. They have to print money because the gravy train, they're just used to the gravy train. That's the life for them. Gravy train is the way things work. So fuck everybody else, as long as I've got the gravy train rolling in. But eventually the playground starts to look bad, right? What's the point of being rich if the playground is full of a bunch of angry, monkeys? Your worker monkeys are no longer doing their jobs. Instead, they're gathering in the streets and throwing tomatoes at your car as you drive by. So it starts to fall apart, and they become panicked. And they say, well, how do we control all of these people? And that's when you get this World Economic Forum Davos bullshit, right? They're all just trying to figure out how to control the situation so they can keep the gravy train rolling in. And Bitcoin has thrown such a huge wrench into their plans that it's accelerated so that they can try and get ahead of Bitcoin's influence before the black hole sucks all of their power away and just creates sort of a bubble of truth that pops, right? We're all sitting in this sort of illusion. And once that bubble of illusion is popped, that's it. There's no going back. Pandora's box is open. And I think the Genesis block was Pandora's box. That's done. That part of our history is dying, and that's what we're watching happen. And nobody really realizes it except the Bitcoiners and the people trying to stop Bitcoin. Those are the only people on the planet right now who really are talking about this and understand what's taking place. And I think that's why Bitcoiners on Twitter, to me, are kind of like these, amazing Rebel Alliance, Star Wars level people, because they're holding the power of the future in their memes, right? These memes have incredible power, and there is no way to defend against it. It's kind of like the Karate Kid swan kick, right? If done correctly, no defense. There's no defense against the meme. Once it's started, you're done. Clown world is that, right? We're dressing everybody up as clowns now. By the way, in honor of this podcast, I made a new Clown World video. I don't know if you saw my Clown World videos. What I do is I there's this great song called "Send in the Clowns."
Yes.
And I just, what I do is I go in Photoshop, I take pictures of politicians and things and who have been instrumental in taking away our rights, and I put them in clown makeup, and I put them in this video to this music. And it actually was really effective. When I first did it, I almost choked up because it was like, wow, this is kind of powerful meme right here, right? If you can do this, if you can get the people to look at these assholes for what they are, which is dressed up clowns trying to distract you from what's going on in the background of the circus, then you can fight them. You can say, fuck you, you're a clown. Why should I listen to you? And you can get other people to do that too. And so that's what the Clown World meme is all about. I found a great version of the song by Glenn Close, the actress, and I spliced some new Clown World portraits I did of different politicians and that I hadn't done before. Gavin Newsom in California, governor of California, Jacinda Ardern, I think her name is, prime minister of New Zealand. And I made, new clown portraits. I put it to that music, and I will drop that and mention this podcast in the post later after we're done here.
I love it. Well, Look, I think it's probably a good time to wrap it up. I could sit here and chat to you literally all day. It's
Sure.
been one of my favorite conversations I've had on this podcast. I've been doing it for a few years, but we've gone down so many rabbit holes. It's been
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating. I'd
Yeah.
love to go more into some of the UFO stuff and some of the other
Absolutely.
conspiracy stuff as well, but maybe we can do that on another show. I've really, really enjoyed it. So thanks so
Oh
much
yeah.
for coming on.
Yeah, I loved it. Thanks for having me on. I've never been on a podcast before, so this is a first for me. And if you ever want to talk about any of that stuff, I can go on for hours, so without cease. I'm an encyclopedia on that stuff, so I know there's a lot of Bitcoiners who are into that stuff too, and so you'll definitely have some listeners tuning in to hear all the weird stuff. That's I
Yeah.
think a fun part of Bitcoin is that you have some people with strange stories to tell.
I really mean that. It really has been one of the most interesting conversations, and I definitely would like to get you back on. I try and keep these a little bit, under 2 hours, and I think with all the
Yeah.
technical issues and stuff, it would be good to split it up. But definitely, if you're up for it, I would love to have you back on. Yeah, it's been really cool. Thank you for putting out the memes. Thank you for speaking truth and putting these threads out. It's really awesome. For anyone who's listening now, can you just show your Twitter so they can go and find you?
Yeah, my Twitter handle is at chief_Bitcoin. And just come on and a lot of my stuff is the intense sort of thing. It's not for kids, but if you like Bitcoin, you like memes, and you want to be up to date on the latest news about COVID tyranny and things like that, then my feed has a lot of that stuff on it.
Brilliant. All right, mate. Thanks again, and we'll catch up soon, hopefully.
All right, thanks for having me, Max.